going to another city at the moment, so I thought an opportune time to speak about the history of the Jewish community of China over here. We've already spoken about 35 countries. Once again, in advance, apology, there's going to be quite a bit of noise over here, but hopefully you can all hear me. And we're speaking about the Chinese Jewish community history. It goes back to antiquity, let us say. Modern day Jews in China, let's say, are predominantly composed of Sephardic Jews and descendants in of itself. Now, other Jewish ethnic divisions represented. There's various Mizrahi Jews, Ashkenazic Jews, and converts to Judaism also. Very interesting enough. Now, the Jewish Chinese community manifests, let's say, a wide range of, let's say, cultural traditions, and it also encompasses the full spectrum of Jewish religious observance in itself. So a very, very small minority. Obviously, Chinese Jews have had an open presence in the country since the arrival of the first Jewish immigrants, I believe during the 8th century Common Era, friends, over here. And I think relatively isolated communities of Jews developed through, let's say, the Han and the Song dynasties, respectively. That was 7th to 13th centuries. And all the way to the Qing dynasty, I think that was in the 19th century. Most notably, I believe the Kaifang Jews, also known as Chinese Jews, as I say themselves, is often used in a restricted sense in order to refer to these communities. Now, I think it was in the 19th and early 20th century, the Jewish merchants from around the world began to trade in Chinese ports, particularly in the commercial centres of Hong Kong, which was a time British colony. Shanghai, where the Shivat Mir would actually be part of the international, let's say, settlement for French concession, and there was a Harbin, also a trans-Siberian railway at that stage in time. So very, very interesting. I think in the first half of the 20th century, thousands of Jewish refugees escaping from pogroms in the Russian Empire would arrive to China at that stage in time. So very, very interesting. And what happened afterwards, we're going to explore the history over here of China Jewish community. Okay, so as everyone that's coming in, welcome to our community. And we are exploring China over here. We are in China here on Hanukkah time period. And I think it was French concession time. I think in the first, let's say, half of the 20th century, thousands of Jewish refugees escaped from the Russian Empire. There was a lot of pogroms, unfortunately. By the time of the establishment of the People's Republic of China, this was in the year 1949, only a few Jewish people were known to have maintained the practice of their religion and culture. And since 2015, descendants of Kaifang Jews, let's say, came under government pressure and suspicion at that point in time. So let's explore a bit within regards to Chinese Jewish community history here on the second night of Hanukkah. Okay, the presence of the community of Jewish immigrants in China arguably began sometimes in the Song dynasty, as we said before. I think it was a number of scholars had, let's say, argued about its presence in China, especially during the earlier Tang dynasty. That was in the 9th century. And the Persian geographer, someone named Ibn Khordadbeh, I believe, he noted that the travels of Jewish merchants, I think they were called the Radhinsta, whose trades took them to China via the Silk Road through Central Asia and India. He mentioned the presence of Jewish merchants in a number of Chinese cities. It happened to be an important economic role they played, transporting merchandise as well as transmitting scientific and technological expertise all the way from Spain and I think France and Middle East and China by land and sea. So that's very, very interesting. And that's something that we have to point out over here. I think there was a medieval Italian explorer named Jacob of Ancona, and he talks about, he was an author supposedly of a book of travels and was a scholarly Jewish merchant who wrote in the vernacular Italian, and I think he would reach China in the year 1271, and some people will question his veracity in himself. Anyone tuning in live to the channel, please smash the subscribe button. We're nearing 8,000 subscribers over here on the channel as we're exploring the Jewish history of China over here on bus journey over here going to the city of Elad. Now, I think there was a Ming dynasty closed off the Silk Road by the Nijibo. It became an important trading port of the Martin Silk Road. And I think come of 1489, a stone tablet stated that the Jewish communities of Nijno and Kaifang had a very good relationship with each other. And let's just say that after the Kaifang Jews lost their holy texts, there was a flood reported in the year 1461, and I think the Nikbo Jews gave 2 Torah scrolls to their brethren, let's just say in Kaifang at that point in time. The tablet stated, when the synagogue was rebuilt, Shibin, Li Rong, and Geo Jian and Zhang Zuan went to Ningbo and brought back a scroll of the scriptures. Now, I think the Zhang Ying of Ningbo brought another scroll to Kaifang and respectfully presented it to our synagogue, they stated. It is believed, I think, the Ningbo Jewish community itself was quite sizable, and let's just say for a smaller one would not be able to, let's say, spare 2 Torah scrolls in of itself. So very interesting. We're learning about it's a let's say, 1492 Spanish expulsion era in itself. The availability of these scrolls could mean the Ningbo Jewish community was vibrant and observant. It gives a very big sign about that. The descendants of the Ningbo Jewish community moved out to Shanghai and Hong Kong in the early 20th century due to war and to seek economic opportunity, and rebuilt a reputation, achieving immense success in business, science, media, and industries, respectively, over here. So, very, very interesting. Of Chinese's opening to the West, it would coincide, I think, with a period of British colonial. I think it was the first group of Jews would settle in China. It consists of Jews who arrived in China under British protection following the First Opium War, and many of these Jews were of Indian and Iraqi origin. There was a significant, let's say, British colonialism in these regions. I think the second Jewish community settled in China during the, let's say, the first decades of the 20th century, when many Jews would arrive in Hong Kong and Shanghai. During those cities, periods of economic expansion will take place. Many more Jewish people arrived, I think, as refugees from the Russian Revolution of 1917, and come up the late 1930s and 1940s, there will be a surge of individual Jews and a surge of Jewish families that will settle in China for the purpose of seeking refuge, unfortunately, from the horrors of the Holocaust in Europe. And let's say they were predominantly of European origin people that come. Shanghai was notable for its special area that was established for the housing of Jewish refugees, and I think most of them would leave after the war, and the rest of them relocated either prior or immediately after the establishment of the People's Republic of China. So that's what's chronicled over here. Very, very interesting enough. So anyone tuning in live at the moment, welcome to our community. If you're here for the first time, we're exploring the Jewish community history of China over here. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel now, friends. Some Jews who lived in China would convert to Islam and became, let's say, human Muslims themselves. Obviously, we don't celebrate conversion of any religion. We're thriving Orthodox Jews. I think there's a manuscript that will actually state that they prayed in both Hebrew and Chinese. Ancient Jewish communities, let's just say at that point in time, in China, adapted well to the Han Chinese customs, including paternal, I believe, descent, and at that point in time, so let's just say in that vernacular, and intermarriage, I think, with Han Chinese was actually taking place while I think they maintained their Jewish identities. Over the centuries, most of the Jewish community came to be virtually indistinguishable from the Han and Hu Chinese population due to the fact that Chinese Jews historically hold a strong Chinese identity. And I think the current government does not recognize them as one of the 56 ethnic minorities. So, okay, since the religious, I'm just reading this, by the way, from Wikipedia at the moment over here. Yeah, so very interesting over here, friends. Everyone tuning in live, welcome, and welcome to our community. And yeah, just welcome everyone, and I appreciate all the fantastic feedback I'm getting all the time. Okay, so I think there would be a manuscript that would state that they prayed both in Hebrew and in other languages at that point in time. I think it was in Hebrew and Chinese. There was ancient Jewish communities in China would adapt to these Han Chinese customs itself. The religious practices are considered functionally extinct under the law of return, and they are required, I believe, to undergo, let's say, conversions to Orthodox Judaism in order to become eligible for immigration to Israel. That's what's reported over. So that's important over this. Maybe they're Judaism got watered down at one stage in time. Now, I think some international Jewish communities are beginning to search for their descendants of Jews in an attempt to help them revive their interest in their Jewish roots, apparently. I think there was expansion of, apparently, University of Nottingham in Ningbo, China, in Lijiang province. More Jewish scholars at that point in time would have moved there in an attempt to reach out to Jewish communities of, let's say, Zhejiang, included a prominent tribe which I believe lives in an area called Ningbo. Now, contrary to a popular belief in the Western world, the Kaifang Jews are not the only Chinese Jewish community. I believe the Kaifang Jews are recognized as Jews because they have become more observant in modern times. Now, once again, I would recommend everyone to ask everyone, always go to competent Orthodox authority within regards to knowing about one's Jewishness if they're in doubt, and so on and so forth. A local halakhic Orthodox, right? But they are just one of the many ancient Jewish communities living in China. The Ningbo Jews are well known for their contributions to their Jewish heritage, but nowadays they are, I think, non-practicing Jews. Once again, the term Kaifang Jews is not interchangeable with Chinese Jews. We have to point that out. But I'm not too sure of the halakhic, let's say, their let's say level in itself. So very interesting. Now let's look at a bit more history. I think there's some scholars out there claim that the ancestors of the Jews who have historically resided in various places in China were members of 10 lost tribes. I'm not too sure who these scholars are, of the exiled ancient kingdom of Israel, which relocated, I believe, to places which were located in present-day China. The observance of some ancient Jewish rituals was documented in some places. Also, one of the well-known groups was the Kaifang Jews, as I mentioned before, who are, let's say, purported to have traveled to Persia, to India during the Han Dynasty, and migrated from, let's say, Muslim inhabited regions of northwestern China, modern-day Gansu province, and I think to Henan province during the early northern Song Dynasty. This was between 960 to 1127. And Kaifang Jews themselves were most prominent between the 10th and 11th century, reported over. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community over here as we're exploring the history of Chinese Jewish community over here. And I think there's another tradition that says the first Jews emigrated to China through Persia after the Roman Emperor Titus captured Jerusalem in 70 Common Era. There was a large number of Jews emigrated from Persia during the reign of Emperor Ming of Han. This was the early Common Era, very early, the first 100 years. And writing apparently in 1900, there was someone named Joseph Brucker, father apparently, hypothesized that Jews came to China from India by a sea route in ancient times. I think there were 3 steles with inscriptions were found at the Kaifang Bear. Some historical, let's say, suggestions, the oldest dating from the year 1489. They commemorated the construction of a synagogue, I think in 1163, and that has the name Kinzen Si, a term for a mosque, which is, let's just say, frequently used in Chinese. That's where we have to stay over. I think they state that the Jews entered China from India in the, let's say, later Han Dynasty. This was between 225 to 220 Common Era. And the Jews, let's say 70 Chinese surnames, the audience with an unnamed Song Dynasty emperor, and its final lists, let's say, transmission of their religion from Abraham down to the prophet Ezra. Interesting enough. The second tablet dates back to 1512, found at the Zhuangzhang, the Zhong synagogue, I believe, and it contains a detailed description of the Jewish religious practices there were over there. Now, the third tablet apparently dates back to the year 1663, commemorating, let's say, the building up again of the Quinzin Si synagogue, and also, let's say, recaps various informations, which is written on the other 2 steles in of itself. Now, anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community as we are exploring the history of the Chinese Jewish community over here. Actually, we're on a journey going from the city of Bet Shemesh to the city of Elad in central Israel. So welcome everyone to our community, and don't forget to subscribe also to the channel. We will really, really appreciate it. Okay, let's explore more within regards to the Jewish community of China. Very interesting enough. Sorry that it's become a bit dark now over here from the place I'm recording, because it's obviously night time, and yeah, it's just a very busy bus in itself. So I think that this Joseph Brucker would believe that Matteo Ricci's manuscripts state that only approximately 10 or 12 families lived in Kaifang in the late 16th and 17th centuries, and they reportedly resided there for 5 to 600 years. And the manuscripts also stated that a large Jewish community in Hangzhou, and there was a Jewish community that was larger than the Jewish community of Kaifang, because local Jews over there fled south of Hangzhou, soon to be crowned at that point in time the Emperor Ganzong. I think it was in 1489 the Steel States Jews abandoned Banlijing or Kaifang, and many Jewish communities were established in China during the Middle Ages, reported over. However, not all of them left evidence of their existence. The following, I think, is a list of names of Jewish communities which are known about. So obviously Kaifang, Hangzhou, Ningbo, Yangtze, Guangzhou, Beijing, Niren and Ixing and Liange, respectively, over there. Now, today the Chinese term for Jews is Yuzdayan, I believe. A proper pronunciation of this, let's say, seems to be the proper pronunciation of the term Yehudei, or word for Jew in of itself, respectively, over here. So I'm just going to take a short break because I'm on a journey at the moment. We're going out the city. We're going to say a tefillah haderech, a special prayer for traveling outside the city. So I'm just going to say a prayer because we're going out of the city from the city of Bet Shemesh to Elad. So we're going to do a prayer from going outside the city. So we're just on the bus at the moment, and we're exploring the history of the Chinese Jewish community over here. So very, very interesting. So welcome everyone to our community. As I'm going to say a quick prayer within regards to that, friends, and as we explore the Jewish community over here. Remember, we've recorded already about 35 different countries, the history about over here. So this is not the first one. Oh, okay. יש לך יוטיוב או... אוקיי. סליחה. יש לך תפילת הדרך? בסידור? בטלפון. כן, בטלפון יש? שעה לחצי דקה? כן, so we're just going to do a... זה פה? עידוד מזרח. כן, זה בסדר. יש לו תפילת הדרך. Okay, friends, we're going to say tefillat haderech, a prayer for the traveling journey, because I'm going from the city of Bet Shemesh to Elad. Yirat Malevnecha Adnai Lehinu B'Lei Avotenu, Shetzorchin L'Shalom, Tatzin L'Shalom, Betadrechin L'Shalom, Tgeinu L'Machos Chavsin L'Chaim Tovim U'Lesimcha L'Shalom, Betachzin L'Shalom, Tatzin B'Kav Kol Oyev V'Orev B'Derech ומתאונות דרכים ומסכנת מחבלים ומכל בני בוענות ומדרשות ובאות לעולם. תשלח ברכה בחום עשינו ותן לכן לחסד רחמים בעיניך ובעיני חיינו ותשמע כל צרכינו כי אל שמע תפילה ותפנו אתה. ברוך ה' שמע תפילה ויעקב הלך לדרכו ויקו בו מלאכי אלוהים ויעקב כאשר ראה מחנה אלוהים זה ויקרא השם המקום אלוהים. ויעקב הלך לדרכו ויקו בו מלאכי אלוהים ויום יעקב כאשר ראה מחנה אלוהים זה ויקרא השם המקום מחניים. ויעקב הלך לדרכו ויקו בו מלאכי אלוהים ויום יעקב כאשר ראה מחנה אלוהים זה ויקרא שם המקום הים. וייסעו כחצת אלוהים עליהם אשר סבתם ולא רדפו אחרי בני יעקב. וייסעו כחצת אלוהים עליהם אשר סבתם ולא רדפו אחרי בני יעקב. וייסעו כחצת אלוהים עליהם אשר סבתם ולא רדפו אחרי בני יעקב. תודה רבה. Okay, so that was just a prayer. If anyone wondering, we're just doing a special tefillah or prayer when we go outside from one city to the other. We specifically say that over here. So very, very interesting. And we're exploring the history of the Chinese Jewish community over here. So welcome everyone, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now, I think it was a Muslim of the name Nanjing would tell Semido that 4 families of Jews apparently converted to Islam since they were the last Jews living in Nanjing at that point in time. I think there was various different Chinese individuals worked in a government service owned by big properties in China. This was in the 17th century. And Shanghai's first wave of Jews came in the second half of the 19th century, I believe, reported over. Many were Mizrahi Jews from Iraq. The first Jewish person who arrived was someone named Elias David Sassoon, who that was in the year 1850. He would open a branch in connection with his father's Bombay house. Since that period of Jewish people gradually migrated from India to Shanghai, reported over, and most of them were engaged from Bombay as clerks, by the firm David Sassoon and Co. The famous, we've spoken about this on various occasions before. Now, the community was composed mostly of Asian, Sephardic people, also German and Russian Jews. Though I think there were very few Austrian and French and Italian origin among them. Jewish people took considerable part in developing trade in China, and several served on municipal councils. Among them, I believe, someone named Silas Aaron Hardun, who we'll speak about in due course. He was a partner in the firm of the E.D. Sassoon and Co. He would serve in the French and Egyptian councils at the same time, and during the early days of Jewish settlement in Shanghai, Jews were involved in the trade in opium and Bombay cotton yam, respected over. So that's something that I think we mentioned about before when we spoke about the famous Sassoon, let's say, philanthropy dynasty. Let's speak about Elias David Sassoon, a famous person. He lived between 1820 to 1880. He was an Indian Baghdadi Jewish merchant. He was the son of David Sassoon and a member of the famous Sassoon family. He would earn, I believe, an immense fortune alongside his family, and he was the founder of the E.D. Sassoon and Co., a trading company he founded in 1867. He was born in Baghdad, to a Baghdadi family. He was the second son of David Sassoon and a member of, obviously, the Sassoon dynasty, the family. His father, David, was an Iraqi Baghdad Jewish merchant and a trader who fled his family from Baghdad to Bombay, India in 1832 and later trade in textiles. Sassoon was one of 14 siblings reported. Yes, sorry about that. The connection's going to probably go again. I think it was in the year... Yes, sorry about that. The connection's going to probably go again. I think it was in the year 1832 that Sassoon's David founded, I believe, David Sassoon and Sons, which later became David Sassoon and Co., the trading company. After the first Opium War, which ended, I believe, in the year 1842, Sassoon was 24 years of age and was sent by his father, David, to China to seek new opportunities for their family's trading business. In 1844, he would arrive in the area of Guangzhou, and I think then was known then as Canton. 1845, he would go to Shanghai and was recognizing that the best business opportunities were in Shanghai. Sassoon was instrumental in his family's business growth in China, and in 1850, Sassoon and his older brother Albert became partners in the David Sassoon and Co. with their father. Sassoon, I think, will expand the Sassoon family's business in China, and eventually the family's trading fleet carried around 1/5 of the total opium imported to China. The Sassoon business would sell opium and British textiles in China in exchange for, let's say, tea and silver, I believe. Very interesting enough. So you can see the amounts that was actually done by them. Okay, I think in 1867, Sassoon would separate from his family company and establish his own company called the E.D. Sassoon and Co. And as I think, yeah, it's a very, very interesting. This actually happened about at that stage in time, and I think, yeah. It was very interesting. After establishing E.D. Sassoon & Co., he would import clothes from Britain and sell it to luxury stores in Shanghai that catered to wealthy European settlers in the city. Now, he was married to someone named Leah Gubai. They were parents to 6 children, including Jacob, Edward, Joseph, and Hannah. In 1872, Sassoon established the Jewish cemetery in Chinkpoki in memory of his son Joseph, who I believe had died in Shanghai in 1868. His daughter Hannah married Sassoon David. He died in 1880 in British Ceylon, I believe. Now, the Sassoons built the Knesset Eliyahu synagogue in Mumbai. I think we've spoken about this before in another video, which was completed in 1884 in memory of Sassoon. After his death, E.D. Sassoon was led by his son Jacob Sassoon, and in 1909, his son Jacob became the first baronet of Bombay in the baronetage of the United Kingdom reported over. So he's a key figure, as I say, in Chinese Jewish history over here. So let's talk a bit more about modern times in China. I think contemporary sources estimate the Jewish population in China in 1940, including in Manchukuo, to be about 36,000. In the 19th and early 20th century, Jewish merchants from around the world began to trade in Chinese ports, particularly in commercial centres of Hong Kong, which was for a time, I think, a British colony. Shanghai was an international settlement and a French concession. And let's say Harbin was a trans-Siberian railway. And in the first half of the 20th century, thousands of Jewish refugees escaping from pogroms in the Russian Empire arrived in China. Now, by the time of the establishment of the People's Republic of China, I think in 1949, only a few Jews known to have maintained the practice of their religion and culture. I think China's Jewish communities have been ethnically diverse, if I'm not mistaken, ranging from Jewish people of Kaifang and all other parts of throughout China. Kaifang Jewish ancestry has been, let's just say, found among their descendants living among the Hu Muslims, such as during, I think, the Haji pilgrimage, and the Hu Muslim woman Jin sang songs found about her, let's say, Jewish ancestry, I believe, and wrote about it, I think, in an article called China's Jews, if I'm not mistaken, in the Points East in 1981. Anyone tuning in live at the moment, please subscribe to the channel as we're exploring the Jewish history of China a bit. Now, Jewish converts to Islam who became Hu Muslims in the 16th century China were called to the Blue Hat Hu Buddhists, and if I'm not mistaken, Hu clans of Kaifang, the Zhang Jews clan, and they will become Muslim, unfortunately, over there. And okay, let's talk about the Jewish communities of Shanghai. Shanghai Jewish communities included Baghdadi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews from Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Europe. The Baghdadi and Russian Ashkenazi communities, let's say, predated the influx of Jewish refugees from Nazi Germany and German-occupied Europe. Baghdadi Jews came as merchants, including via India in the mid-1850s. In 1887, a major donation from David Sassoon funded the establishment of the Bet El, Shanghai's first formally established synagogue. And Rabbi Meir Ashkenazi, later after the First World War, many Ashkenazic Jews came from Europe. Rabbi Meir Ashkenazi, who was a Chabad Lubavitch, was the chief rabbi of Shanghai between 1926 to 1949. Now, it's actually interesting. The Shanghai Jewish Refugees Museum, I believe, commemorates the experience of Jewish refugees. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the museum and praised Shanghai's historic role as a sanctuary for Jewish refugees in itself. So very, very interesting. Okay, now let's, this is something we had to point out. We'll speak at Rabbi Meir Ashkenazi in due course. Russian Jews. In the early 20th century, many Russian Jews fleeing from pogroms in several towns in the Russian Empire would move to northeast China for permanent settlement. And someone named Rabbi Aaron Moshe, I think Kislev, would serve in Harbin from 1913 until he passed away in 1949. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, many white Russians fled to Harbin, and these included among them Dr. Abraham Kaufman, who would be a leading role in the Harbin Jewish community after 1919, and the parents of future Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, interesting enough. According to estimates, over 20,000 Jewish people lived in Harbin and played a key role, I believe, in shaping of the local politics, economy, and international trade. Soviet Russian Jewry, I think Grigoryo Vorinsky would play an important role also in the establishment of the Chinese Communist Party, I believe, in the 1921 from the Comintern also, respectively. I think someone named Sun Yat-sen, he was the founder of the Republic of China, or Qin, China, admired the Jewish people and Zionism. And he also saw parallels between the persecution of the Jews and, let's say, the combination of China by the Western powers at that point in time. He stood through their countries as their country was destroyed. The Jewish nation has existed today. Zionism is one of the greatest movements of the present time. All lovers of democracy, I cannot help but support wholeheartedly and welcome with enthusiasm the movement Restore Your Wonderful and Historic Nation, which has contributed so much to the civilization of the world and which rightfully deserve an honourable place, let's say, in the families of nations. And let's talk a bit about World War II over here, friends. Another wave of 18,000 Jews would come from Germany, Austria and Poland to Shanghai in the late 1930s and early 1940s to escape the horrors of the Holocaust. Shanghai was an important safe haven for Jewish refugees during the Holocaust, since it was one of the few places in the world that did not require a visa or travel documents. The chaos of Shanghai during the war with Japan also meant that there was no customs officials, and therefore refugees were able to simply pass by the customs house when they arrived to the city. The Jewish communities already existing in China, Baghdadi Jews from British colonies and Ashkenazi Jews from Russia, welcomed refugees, and they had already institutions such as synagogues into which Jewish refugees could be incorporated. Some Chinese diplomats, such as Ho Fyung-shan, issued a protected passports, I believe, and the Chinese diplomat, Sugari, issued transit visas in which refugees could go to Shanghai after a short stay in Japan. The Japanese occupiers of Shanghai did not initially treat Jews harshly. Among other factors, Japan sought to avoid harsh treatment of Jews in Shanghai so as not to antagonize USSR and the United States. Now, in 1941, Japanese forces began systematically taking control of areas of Shanghai which they had not previously occupied. In November of that year, Nazi Germany Jews abroad of their citizenship, resulting in Jews, abroad becoming stateless refugees. In 1943, the occupying Japanese army required these 18,000 Jews, stateless refugees, to relocate to an area, I believe, of 0.75 square miles, if I'm not mistaken, at that point in time. So, very, very interesting. Yeah, so I think let's talk a bit about late 20th century. Soon after the defeat of the Japanese and the dissolution of the Shanghai ghetto, the Jewish refugees left primarily to live in Palestine, the United States of America, Australia, Canada, and the Soviet Union, with a small amount going to Germany and Austria. 7,270 Central European Jewish refugees in Shanghai in 1947, 1,700 in 1949, and 21 in 1960s. The non-refugee Jewish communities in Shanghai also decreased in size during the 1950s, and the well-established, Baghdadi Jewish families transferred their business places, including Hong Kong and the Bahamas. And I think come with the 1950s, the largest destinations for, departing Jews from Shanghai were Israel, followed by the Soviet Union. There was prominent non-Chinese Jews living in China from the establishment of the People's Republic of China at that point in time, including Sidney Shapiro, Israel Epstein, and Ruth Weiss, if I'm not mistaken, a Jew. I think there was also a, very, very interesting. I think there was structured a Jewish life in Beijing in 1979, and there was founding of the Kahila Beijing. This was an, I think, more progressive, egalitarian-led community. I don't think it was an Orthodox one. Also, to point out over here, I think it was in June 1985, if I'm not mistaken, an international group of scholars and activists gathered in Palo Alto, California, to establish the San Judaic Institution, if I'm not mistaken. The Institution of Jewish Studies were established in the Nanjing University in 1992. Since the 1990s, Shanghai's municipal government has taken the initiative to preserve historical Western architectures that were constructed during Shanghai's colonial past. Many formerly Jewish-owned hotels and private residences have been included in a preservation project. And I think in 1997, a Kadoorie residence turned Shanghai Children's Place had their spacious front garden largely removed in order to make room for the city's overpass system under construction. I think a one-day tour, a history of Jewish presence in Shanghai, can be arranged, I think, from the Center of Jewish Studies in Shanghai. I think there's someone named Rabbi Shalom Greenberg. He's a Chabad Lubavitch rabbi in New York City, who arrived in Shanghai to serve the community in August 1998. And Rabbi Arthur Schneier, he was a president of the Appeal of Concession Foundation of New York, donated a Torah to the community that same year. And on the first day of Rosh Hashanah of that year, in September 1999, there was a Jewish New Year service held in the Ohel Rachel Synagogue for the first time since 1952. Let's speak about the Ohel Rachel Synagogue. What is that? That was a Jewish congregation located on North Shaanxi Road in the Jing'an district of Shanghai, China. It was built by Jacob Elias Sassoon in memory of Rachel, his wife Rachel, and it was completed in 1920, consecrated in 1921, and it's a Sephardi synagogue. Under the Japanese occupation during World War II, it was repurposed, and again following the conquest of Shanghai in 1949. The synagogue has been protected under architectural landmark since 1994, and it's reopened, I think, since 1999, as we mentioned about beforehand. Also, it was constructed as from Sir Jacob Elias and Sir Edward Elias Sassoon, the wealthy Sassoon family, who built many of Shanghai's historic structures. It replaced its predecessor, the Bet El Synagogue, established in 1887, and was designed, I think, by the Shanghai film of Robert Bradshaw Moorhead and Sidney Joseph House, if I'm not mistaken, built on Seymour. It was opened in March 1920. The synagogue was named after Jacob Sassoon's wife, Rachel, as we mentioned before, and known as the Seymour Synagogue also. And it was first purpose-built synagogue in Shanghai, built up, let's just say, itself very interesting enough. And I think its interior arrangement uses round-headed windows on its sides, which were patterned after Bevis Marx's and Lauderdale Road synagogues in London. Rachel's Camellia Sanctuary, overlooked by second floor, has a capacity of 700 people. Interesting enough, including a library. They have a ritual bath, a mikveh, and a playground. Ohel Rachel is the largest synagogue, described as the second to none in the East, respectively. The Republic of China, the Jewish club Hadut, opened the Ohel Rachel compound in 1921. It was. They hold both Sephardic and Ashkenazic social events over there. And interesting enough, there was I think during the Second World War, the foreign concessions, including the area around Ohel Rachel, continued international control even after Japanese victory in 1937, the Battle of Shanghai. Shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japan invaded and occupied the remaining settlements in Shanghai. Interesting enough over there. So that's another interesting. Let's talk a bit about the Bet El Synagogue of Shanghai, a Jewish Orthodox congregation. Jews, remember, we settled in Shanghai in the 1848. Most were Sephardic Jews, Baghdadi and Bombay from India. During the 1870s, the Baghdadi Jewish community used rented space for religious worship. Bet El Synagogue was established all the way back in 1887, and it was located in Peking Road, a major thoroughfare in the English settlement, and was the first formally established synagogue in Shanghai. Interesting enough, I think it was Jacob Elias and Edward Elias Sassoon built the Ohel Rachel Synagogue, as mentioned before, to replace the Bet El Synagogue. Now let's talk a bit about the Sassoon baronets. The Sassoon baronets, who were the family that was created in 1890 to 1909 respectively, for members of the Anglo-Indo-Iraqi and Iraqi branches of the Sassoon family of Baghdadi Jews. I think it was the Kingston Gore of the East Terrace was created by a baronetage of the United Kingdom in the 22nd of March from Anglo businessman Albert, formerly known as Abdullah. Interesting enough. Second baronet, Sir Edward Sassoon, represented the Hythe Liberal Unionist Party, member of Parliament, also respectively. So that's very, very interesting. And the third baronet, Sir Philip Sassoon, was a conservative British population, and he was an art collector and a social host who represented, let's say, the height in the House of Commons in 1912. He served as Under Secretary of State for Arts between 1924 to 1929, respectively. Also, the Susan Baronetcy, let's just say, was, if I'm not mistaken, created in the 9th of February 1909 for, I think it was Sir David's, I think it was for, if I'm not mistaken, yeah. It was Sir Albert's nephew, Jacob Elias Sassoon. He sadly had no children, so a special reminder enabled his younger brother to inherit. The third baronet was also childless, unfortunately. Thus, this title became extinct after he passed away in 1961. And very interesting. I think the special reminder of baronetcy of the Sassoon was created in 1909 from the London Gazette. And the King has been pleased to give directions for the preparation of the warrants of His Majesty's Royal Sign Manual, authorising letters patent to be passed under the Great Seal of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, conferring the dignity of the baronet of the said United Kingdom upon Jacob Elias Sassoon of the City of Bombay and the Empire of India, respectively, a squire and their heirs, let's say, male of his body, lawfully begotten, with the remainder of Edward Elias Sassoon of Governorsy Place in the City of Westminster in of itself, a squire and their heirs, let's say, made of his body, lawfully begotten in of itself. So very, very interesting. let's go back, exploring the history of China again, 21st century. As of 2010, I believe, it's estimated 2,000 to 3,000 Jews live in Shanghai. In May 2010, the Ohel Rachel Synagogue in Shanghai was temporarily reopened in the local Jewish community for weekend services on Shabbat. Synagogues are found in Beijing, Shanghai, and also in Hong Kong. So both Chinese Jews, Israelis, and diaspora communities. In 2001, someone named Rabbi Shimon Freundlich of the Chabad Lubavitch movement came and settled in Beijing with the mission of building and leading a Chabad Lubavitch center in Beijing. A Kehillat Beijing, I think it was called, continues in practice in conducting regular holiday services, community activities, let's say, including retreats and celebrations. I think it was Kamot 2007, the Sephardic community of Shanghai opened the synagogue, a study hall, a Beit Midrash, a kosher kitchen, educational classes for children and adults, and they have their own Chacham who functions as a teacher. I think someone named Rabbi Ephraim Betzalel, who we speak about in due course, who manages local community affairs, kashrut needs, and since a significant amount of Chinese food products and food ingredients are exported to the American market, let's see, a number of kosher certifications and agencies and rabbis to China serve kosher inspectors, for example, over there. So that's quite important. And some of them from the Orthodox Union, if I'm not mistaken. Now, a famous rabbi, I believe, that was situated in China at one stage in time, was someone named Rabbi Eliyahu Yitzchak Hazan. I think he passed away in the year 1938. Aleph Nisan is his Hilul. Who was he? He was born, actually, I think, in Baghdad, interesting enough. In 1906, he would be appointed the rabbi of the congregation of the Iraqi community in Hong Kong, interesting enough, in China. In 1920, he would go and become the Iraqi rabbi in Shanghai. So we've got an Iraqi rabbi here. He's a key figure, let's just say. In 1930, he will actually go to Eretz Israel and live in Jerusalem. This was. And Rabbi Eliyahu Chazan passed away in 1938 and was buried in Har HaZeitim. And he wrote great Torah books, if I'm not mistaken. A Shilot Shuvot, question answers book, Yad Eliyahu. Let's see, Hakolim Litzat Shuvot B'Halacha, Gam Piyutim, Beketa'im Mispar HaZohar, Mahakdamat HaRambam LeMishnah, respectively, over there. So he was a key rabbi over there also. Now, we can say that Sephardic Jewish life in China was centered around prominent families. Obviously, we mentioned about Sassoons, the Kedoris. They built synagogues in Shanghai, the Ohel Rachel. And I don't think there's any active Sephardic communal structure nowadays. Jewish communities being very small and diverse, but historical Sephardic rabbis led these Baghdadi, let's say, rooty communities. And modern Jewish life is mostly transit expats and local groups, let's just say, in itself. And the Baghdad dominance we saw would really come back through the Hardoons, through the Sassoons and the Kedoris over there, and the major synagogues of obviously Ohel Rachel. And the rabbis would serve the Baghdadi communities, leading the communities in of itself. Very interesting enough, the Jewish community in China has great history. Chinese Jews managed to maintain their traditions and culture, as mentioned, about through centuries. The earliest presence, as mentioned before, of Jews in China is from the Tang Dynasty, as mentioned before. That was from 618 to 907. Over time, Kaifang Jews grew. Let's just say there was a Qing Dynasty, just to recap, between 1644 to 1912. In the 20th century, a new wave of Jewish immigrants obviously came from European Jews, from Nazi persecution, as we mentioned about before. The Jewish community in China is estimated to be 2,000 to 3,000 people, mostly living in Shanghai, Beijing, and Hong Kong. And the Jewish community in China, I think, is quite active and engaged, albeit very, very small. And obviously the Ohel synagogue was a critical place, a key place. The culture of Chinese Jews is a blend of Jewish and Chinese traditions, unique customs, practices. I'm just reading this from the Sephardic website that reflect the history and experiences. And Chinese Jewish culture is a culture which combines Jewish and Chinese culinary traditions. For example, some Chinese Jews celebrate Pesach with a traditional Seder meal that includes Chinese dishes such as egg rolls and dumplings. Obviously, it's got to be kosher Pesach. Got to point that out from the outset over there. And the Chinese Jews have their own distinct religious practices and liturgy, which has evolved over centuries' interaction with local Chinese culture. For example, Kaifang Jews developed a unique prayer book that incorporated Chinese characters, which was written in Hebrew, Chinese, and Judeo-Persian, reported over. The Jewish community in China practices a variety of Jewish traditions and customs, including, I think, we talk most about Orthodox. I think there are some conservative and Reform Jews that I think points out. You know, obviously the key Chinese figures include Sir Victor Sassoon, a British Jewish businessman who made a fortune in the early 20th century in investments in Shanghai. And other notable people were obviously someone named Eileen Chang. That's a well-known Chinese-American author who was born to a Chinese mother and a Jewish father. So technically, if that's the case, if the father was not Jewish, she's not Jewish. I'll just point that out over there. But she had Jewish roots, as point out. In recent years, I think there's been a growing interest in Chinese Jewish culture, particularly among younger of the generation. Many Chinese Jewish people are active involvement in promoting their heritage and preserving traditions. There's a Shanghai Jewish Center and the Kaifang Jewish Cultural Research Center been established to promote the study and preservation of Chinese Jewish history and culture. The cuisine of Chinese Jews also is a unique blend of Chinese and Jewish culinary traditions. There's popular dishes, let's just point out, including jiaozi, a type of dumpling that is typically eaten in a Chinese New Year celebration, and I think latkes, let's just say in itself, a Jewish potato pancake, obviously eaten during the Jewish festival Hanukkah. And Chinese Jews have their own version of apparently something similar to gefilte fish, let's say, a traditional Jewish dish made from ground fish, respectively. So that's another interesting tidbit, and very interesting. Let's speak about Rabbi Ephraim Betzalel, who I think has been a key rabbi in China, if I'm not mistaken. Let's speak about him for a minute. I think he was born in Israel. Rabbi Betzalel was. Rabbi Ephraim Betzalel is a 9th generation Sephardic rabbi. He actually graduated from the Sheba Sephardic Center in 2006, and him and his wife have literally changed the local Jewish community in Shanghai. That's what the Sheba website says. When he arrived in Shanghai, the synagogue had minimal attendance of Shabbat services. Today, I think the Sheba Sephardic Midrash ranges between 40 to 100 people from the 2,000 Jews that make up the local Jewish community. Rabbi Betzalel has built a thriving synagogue which he teaches the children, prepares boys for the bar mitzvah, teaches Torah classes, and performed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, first religious wedding since World War II reported over. I don't know if this was recently or not. This article, I'm not sure what it was recent. He made significant inroads, increasing religious observance, including kashrut, as he was the only shochet in China reported over at one stage of time. He built a slaughterhouse, and where he devotes time each month to slaughtering chickens and beef, and I think the meat is shipped to observant Jews throughout China and is used in the local Jewish community. In addition, Rabbi Betzalel has created a home for Jewish travelers to Shanghai, also a center of international trade, and has also, if I'm not mistaken, attracted an increasing number of Jewish people throughout the world, with escalating number of Jewish visitors passing throughout the city on a regular basis. I think there was a need for a synagogue and a center that they could call home. Let's say Jewish travelers can find kosher food at the SSC Shanghai 24 hours a day, as well as minyanim, prayers, obviously with a quorum of 10 men respectively. Let's explore it, but with regards to the demography element. I think in 2010 we said that the Chinese Jewish population was 2,800 people. The Hebrew University demographer Sergio Dello Pergolo provided the same 2,500 figure, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for 2015. And obviously the communities are spread throughout, especially in areas like Kaifang, Beijing, Shanghai, and very interesting enough, community life at the moment. We're going to conclude in a minute over here. Jewish communal life in China is cultivated, representing the situation of community caught between international and economic inspirations, let's just say, in its various different places. There's Jewish religious life in China. It's exclusively run through regional organizations, institutions, and there's almost no independently run synagogues in China. Instead, religious ceremonies are conducted throughout Chabads and so on and so forth. Kosher food can be found in China's major cities throughout Chabads and other Jewish religious institutions. And I think additionally Beijing has a kosher restaurant. Kosher food also is available everywhere. There's a small Jewish museum of Kaifang, a teaching Torah lane, if I'm not mistaken. And there's relations with China and Israel maintain full diplomatic relations, and the two states work closely together in economic, technological, and military capacities. Interesting enough, the different synagogues we spoke about. There's also the Bet Aaron synagogue. We can speak more about. We're probably actually can do another part 2, I think, of this. One later stage in time, we'll speak about Meir Ashkenazi, another rabbi, and Silas Aaron Hardun, and more. So I think on this note, we're going to wish you all well. We're just recording this here from the city of Elad at the moment. As everyone that you've tuned in live, don't forget, please subscribe to the channel. We're a community here where we're exploring the history of Chinese Jewish community over here on this special edition. So thank you for tuning. We're going to probably do a part 2 because I did have more to say and it's not going to do justice, just this one part. So we're going to expound on more interesting insights within regards to Jewish history. We want to speak about the chief rabbis of what actually happened at that point in time. Now, friends, on this channel, we record loads of great content over here. We travel around to Israel. We are exploring all different countries. We've recorded already about 1,400 biography videos of great rabbis of yesteryear. We also do tours all over Israel, especially in Jerusalem and the city of Bet Shemesh. We speak about Jewish festivals, Parshat HaShavua. We do a daily tidbit of the Daf Yomi also. And we've got great Jewish personalities share over some wisdom every day. It's non-stop Torah. We do Israel advocacy over here. So I can't urge you enough. Please, if you're tuning in live, subscribe to the channel and welcome. We're actually in the city of Elad over here. I wish you all a great day and thank you for watching. Thank you very much.